Well, welcome everybody.
No, it's okay.
Very nice to be here in your circle and hearing about this gathering space and group for a while. It's very nice to be here with you. So anyway, we're very happy to be here and have a little bit of time to share something that we're quite excited about. I'm Scott Tower Maloney, and this is Hugh Huntington.
Well, I'm Hugh Huntington, and I'm delighted to be here too. Part of the group that helped kick this thing off. Now we've made a lot of progress, and I want to share some of that with you this afternoon and tell you where we're going.
I have a question. We sent out a couple of emails in the form of a couple of letters over the last 2 weeks. And I want to know if any of you have received them. One was a personal story, and the other was a bit more detail about the archive. Okay, sort of would like to share with you a brief personal story that's part of why I'm here and very committed to this work. My grandmother met Mayor Baba in 1958, 60 years ago, I believe, this month at the center. And I didn't know anything about her experience. She lived in New York. She died when I was 12. And I remember spending a lot of time with her, but we never talked about Baba. She had a picture of Baba in her library, and I remember seeing it. She was into a variety of different things. She was into acupuncture and vitamins and yoga, and this Indian person. It's kind of all on the list. And I can see in my mind's eye right now, I can see that picture of Baba in her nice library. And there's been many a time when I have wished that I had the presence of mind as a 10-year-old to say, who's that? Tell me about that person. I didn't, and didn't have any conversations with her about Baba at all. And when she died, her house was cleared out. And my mother wasn't interested in Baba at all at that point. And whatever was there, photographs, correspondence, I know that she had correspondence with India and sent medicine there and was involved. And I know that she was involved in the Monday night meetings in New York, apparently. But all of any records just all went because they weren't known, they weren't valued, or perhaps even people who saw it might have been glad to see it go, I don't know. But the result was it was lost. So I don't know my grandmother's Baba story, and I wish I did. Obviously, I feel a deep connection to Baba through her in terms of her having met him. So that's part of my interest and draw to all of this. I don't want that to happen for other people.
What was her name?
Her name was Mamie Kramer.
Is she in Lord Mayfair?
She's in Lord Mayfair in the list of people who were here in '58. That's how she's mentioned. And one of the films of '58, she passes briefly in front of the camera. So that was, there's that. So the idea of helping to preserve stories, helping to preserve artifacts that can serve as people's link and connection to Baba is very close to my heart. And I had an experience working at the archive as a volunteer, helping on one of the collections we're working on from Fred Ella Winterfeld. Lots of these were given to Marshall Hay. And when he died, they went to his heirs and family, and they wanted to do something with them, mostly to preserve them. They've been sitting, a lot of these things have been sitting in a hallway in Myrtle Beach for years. And you all live here, you know what the climate's like better than I do. And it's not the best environment to preserve things. So there's photographs and papers and a variety of documents, which the archive has been working on. And just briefly, I had an experience, which is in the story with copies over there. Please take one. I was helping to what we call rehouse the documents, which means getting them and getting rid of any staples and paper clips and folds and putting them in a safe, protected place. And I just happened upon one letter. It was an aerogram and it was from Go Hair to Ella, and she was writing about some medicines that were needed for Dr. Kenmore. And at the end of this aerogram, Moni had typed a few sentences, as she often did, just a little PS. And in those few sentences, there was a reference to my grandmother, and to send love to her and thank her for something. And it was just one of those wonderful things. It was totally unexpected, and it was a little kind of twinkle in Baba's eye of feeling a connection. So that was part of the story. So that's some background of what has drawn me to be interested in this. Again, very briefly, I grew up going to church, not knowing anything about Baba. Felt there was something there, but there was also something missing. What was it? Who was Jesus? What was he really all about? And I ended up studying early Christianity as an undergrad. And I was interested in those early years. What could I find out about him? The answer was not a great deal, really. But it was an interest, and many years later it dawned on me that we are living in those same early days. And it's really our responsibility to help preserve what has been up until now. People who had direct contact with Baba are a very small group now. And those of us who are fortunate enough to have contact with the Mandali is also, in another decade or two, there will be fewer of those people with those connections, with that richness of story to share with others. And I don't know about you, but my connection with Baba has really been about stories. You know, and hearing the stories, particularly in India, but also from contemporaries, from each other, more than the texts. The texts speak to my head a lot, and the stories often go directly to my heart. And to be able to hear the stories of those who lived with Baba and to feel his presence through them and their stories of what it was like to live and be with him, that was very priceless. And to the extent that it's possible, I think it's really as a community, our responsibility to, and what's it going to be like for our grandchildren or their grandchildren? What's their access to Baba going to be? He's everywhere, he's always accessible, and yet it will be a different time. And so the work that we've been inspired to try to do is very much connected to that desire to contribute in that way. You want to follow on anything?
I think I would just say about a little bit about my journey to how I got on this archive kick. When I was a teenager growing up in Charlotte, an incredible minister who was really a theologian, not a preacher. A theologian came to the church as the new minister. And he would rattle me with his sermon. I mean, I would just get goosebumps. Didn't understand why, but to tell you a bit about him, he instigated single-handedly with some power people in the church. This is a wealthy Baptist church in Charlotte. Some behind-the-scenes political power people put together the rest of the people, and in one day integrated 50 restaurants in the city of Charlotte. Now this
Integrated, what's that?
50 restaurants, integrated 50 restaurants in the city of Charlotte at his direction, okay? And he knew how to organize people, so I don't mean to say he was out there with the flag leading them into the restaurant. He knew how to pull that off. And so this is early in the 1960s. He invited some black people to join this church. Ooh, we did that. All right, so you see, he was doing some stuff that I'm really resonating with. I don't understand. I mean, I'm 16, 18 years old. You know, all I knew was he was rattling. And by the time I got out of the Air Force, I couldn't find a church that would speak to me the same way he did. And he'd had a heart attack and had to retire. And so I wandered through all sorts of spiritual stuff. And found Mayhew Bible shortly before I left northern New Mexico, where I lived for 11 years. And then came to the center, and I picked up discourses, and all of a sudden it's like, wow, boy, this guy knows more about psychology and spirituality than anybody I've ever seen. And so I'm really excited by that. Well, I was out with Ward Parks out at Marijuana. We were studying Francis Brabazon's book, and this line jumped off the page at me that said, the Christian church makes more of the Lamb of Jesus than the Lion. And instantly, that connected me back to my church as a child. And what I realized was, Jesus or Baba, I had never really left. Right? So for me, it's like, I didn't call him Baba when I was 18 years old. But that energy had never left me because I was still searching, and that line made it jump off the page to me. So when the notion of starting this archive came about, I, like Scott, wanted to be a part of being sure that whatever we could preserve would be preserved for future generations, and that the kind of stuff that happened with the few early documents and the manipulation that occurred around those documents was going to be minimized if we could possibly contribute to that. And that's my motivation for doing this. I want to be a part of preserving whatever is original for the next generation and the next generation, and maybe it's 30 generations from now, so they get to see the original documents and draw their own conclusion about who God is. Well, you can tell I can get up on a soapbox with this, but that's my reasoning for being a part of this, and that's what drives me through the process.
And I want to say it is a real gift to work with you. Your commitment and enthusiasm is quite infectious.
Thank you. Your support is quite wonderful.
Okay. What we thought we'd do is to share a short film with you, to introduce you to, we can talk a lot, but it's better to show you, and introduce you to some of the other people involved on the board of the Mayher Archive Collective, and a little bit of the work that the archive has already done, just to give you a flavor. And then we're going to have a chance to talk to you about where we are right now and some exciting things that we're looking at for the future. This film was made by my wife, Diane Tower-Jones, and she wanted to make sure that I would tell you that it's not entirely finished. The color balancing is not perfect, and there's a few other things that don't pass her professional final okay. So I'm doing my job in telling you that.
Baba himself gave great importance to all of these things related to his life. And he said more than once about the importance of preserving these things for posterity and making sure that the generations to come will understand the importance of it.
He showed a lot of interest in saving and archiving things. They still find little bundles of letters with a note on them in India that says, Baba wants you to save this for the permanent record. My name is Erich Adams. I am currently the Executive Director of Mayher Archive Collective.
My name is Hugh Huntington. I'm the president of the Mayher Archive Collective.
I sort of felt a calling to get involved and just help figure out, what's out there.
Something rekindled in me a fire that kind of got diminished by the time I had reached my middle 20s. And the fire centers around being sure that all of Baba's teachings are accurately recorded and minimally or not distorted at all.
My name is Ken Blackman. I came to Baba through books, I came to Baba through pictures, I came to Baba through paraphernalia, artifacts, things of that nature, and it changed my life. So in terms of thinking about moving on in the future, it made sense that we do everything we can, or I do everything I can to help to support determining how we can collect and preserve those things that are precious or could be valuable.
My name is Jean Brunet. I found out that the Vatican Archive, the oldest document they have is from the 8th century. That's the oldest. And I was thinking, if we had a record of Jesus' advent, like we have of Baba, what an incredible treasure it would be for the world.
My name is Scott Tower. I think of all of the stories that we heard from the Maloney over the years of their service. Extraordinary what everybody did out of their incredible love for Baba. And that's very inspiring to me.
Renee Bucinich is also a board member, and she brings a very large picture perspective. That's a very valuable asset to us because there are lots of details that have to be integrated with a larger perspective.
The main goal is really just to encapsulate the totality of the stories and the letters around Meher Baba's life and have them strategically shared throughout all the different Baba centers and all the different continents, and in a way that will last. But in a few generations, that fragrance of that story it's really reliant on these little other books or these little side stories or the audio tapes from Mandalay Hall, things like that.
So it begins with the work of taking the document and preparing it, then documented with Excel, then uploaded, and then available to the world. And when all of that's put up on the web, anybody can search.
Rather than having to search 25 different websites as we do right now for cool quotes, or this one has only audio recordings and this one has only photos and this one, to find a way to actually get into one shared hub where everything can be accessible, so that if you're looking for information about Baba, you can find all of it. Now we're in this sort of post-Mandalay phase where there's like kind of work to be done, and we're not just in the same revere state of just drinking it in. We're kind of like, some people at least feel like, well, we really need to preserve some of this stuff. We're in a unique age. We don't have to lose anything. So I think we should take full advantage of it, because why wouldn't we?
If we can preserve things that accurately give people a chance to connect with Baba's words, with his picture, with anything that he's worn or touched, whatever it is, those things have meaning.
What would be befitting to this avatar?
Well, I think the term collective has to do with part of the vision, which is to be a community-based and community-responsive archive.
Collective, this is the big one for me. Collective, because so many of us from around the world can be connected digitally, and of course we're already connected through Baba's love, but that we can do so much sharing of these very important treasures in every way makes me excited.
Why Asheville is asked a lot. The Asheville community is a growing Baba community. Well, we need a lot of volunteers to be hands-on locally. That's not the only way you can volunteer, but we need that. The resources are here, the people are here, and it's happening here.
We'd love to have more volunteers. We're kind of ramping up to a point where we can train either smaller groups at once on certain subjects, or we'll do here's this type of thing where you're handling paper, here's this kind of thing where you're doing it digitally, you could do it from home.
I am anxious to learn rehousing, putting the documents in Mylar, and also actually learning how to protect and preserve things like sadras and fabric.
So for me personally, one of the messages of the archive is, what's your plan? If you have things, do you have a plan? What would you like to happen to the treasures that you have? If we can be of some help in giving you guidance about that, that's part of the mission of the archive as well.
So if you're inclined to help us, reach out to us, meherarchive.org, and push the contact button. We'd love to hear from you.
very excited to share with you a little bit about where things are right now and fill you in on that. One of the main things to emphasize about this project and the inspiration is the sharing aspect. One of the main motivations of this archive, along with preserving for the future and protecting, is also sharing, so that it's not a place where something would go and not come out, or would go and never be seen again, but rather would be properly preserved, protected, be digitized if it can be digitized, and then shared as widely and openly as possible with as many people who could possibly have access to it. So that's an important aspect of what it's all about. There's a growing need for this work. We spoke about generational changes, and those of us, all of us, regardless of our age, are getting older, like it or not. But there are many people who have many precious things, their own stories, and I understand you're doing great work here for actually doing some recording of people's Baba stories, which is something that this archive hopes to do as well. But there is a need to preserve what's out there. I've talked to many people who say, well, I have this collection of things, either it's mine or it was my relatives or I was given it to by someone else, and I really don't know what to do with it. And maybe it's sitting in a hallway in Myrtle Beach or someplace else. So the first thing we want to do is to help people know what to do to preserve what they've got. And secondly, to, if they desire, to protect it, preserve it and protect it ourselves, and make it available for other people. But there's an urgency to this. You know, in 20 years from now, it will be too late for a lot of the precious Baba artifacts and stories and material. Many of these things are deteriorating physically and need some help and protection so they will survive, so they don't just crumble away and are not available. This work isn't for us. It's obviously it's for Baba entirely, but on another level, it's not for us personally. This is for our children, our grandchildren, their grandchildren, and to me, it feels very humbling to be involved with a project that, by Baba's will and grace, will outlive all of us. So this is not a short-term project, but one that we will hope would be the foundation of something that will last for literally many hundreds of years. There's more work out there than it's possible for any group to do at the moment. And we want to make a contribution to doing as much as we possibly can to help. So some people said, why do you need another archive? There already are archives. This is very true, and the people there are doing tremendous work. In India and Australia, New Jersey, and other places. And we in no way see what we're doing as a competition, but much more establishing cooperation and collaboration. One of our goals is to help, as Hugh referred to earlier, to help create an interface that connects all of the archives globally, so that in the future someone can, if they're sitting in Shanghai or Brooklyn or wherever, will be able to get access to all of the different things that are held in different places. That's a very long-term project, but that's the spirit of collaboration that we're coming from. And another question is, Hugh mentioned it in the clip on the film, talking about Asheville, but more likely coming back to the idea of an archive in the West. And many things have been sent to India, many more things will be, and some things certainly should be. There are a number of people who feel strongly that Baba's time in the West, his contacts here, his life here, the people who were his close ones here, it's appropriate for the history and record of those people to stay here. Not exclusively, to be shared, have multiple copies in different places, but just like the center has its history and its archival projects, we want to be able to provide a home and also a vehicle to help preserve and share information, particularly from Baba's Western visits and his Western followers and the things that are here in this part of the world.
So to piggyback on that a little bit, one of our desires is to link up with other archives so that if we have material that they need to complete their archive or vice versa, it's shared. We've already had discussions with one archive about doing a research project that was too big for us, but we cut it down and agreed that at some point we could move forward on that piece. And in particular, and Scott alluded to this, but I want to emphasize it. We are collecting and preserving for sure, but the driving force for us, particularly with Eric Adams' expertise in the whole world of technology, is to be able to take any of that material and make it available so that instead of bringing it in, collecting and holding, it's like bringing it in, preserving it, and putting it out. The technology that we in this country have access to and the capabilities in this country, we feel like it's really strong. And when we get the community really cranked up and involved in it, we'll be able to do a huge amount of the technological work. And it is to be shared. Now, whether it comes from a project that Nosh One would like to ask us to take a look at, that's cool. Let us do it, digitize it, put it up, send the material back. So we're not about holding and collecting. We're going to do that for people who want us to do that. But we're talking about taking whatever materials, managing them properly, and then making it available. And so that's a huge piece for us. We've been talking with Seven McCauley on and off over the past, I guess, 15 months, because Seven's business is putting together, huge integrated systems. We don't have any agreement on how to do that yet. It's going to take a lot of time and a lot of money and a lot of people. But we're thinking in those terms so that it can all be linked up. So this is not next month's project, it's several years worth of work. But that's the way we're thinking about this material. So I wanted to emphasize that to show that the way we're thinking about archiving is not just about collecting and preserving. It's about setting it up so that everybody has access to it. We also have tried to look at, all right, how do we be prepared for this? So the first thing we needed was an office, and we were donated some vacant space in the bottom of a quadruplex in Asheville. It's an open air to the back. Used to be 2 carriage houses when people parked their horses and small Model Ts underneath this building. And it was converted to some rental space, but that was against the zoning, and so we're not renting anything. We're just occupied. So the space was given to us, and we've been working in it, and it's been okay for now. But if you came in and took a look at it, you'd say, boy, y'all are really crowded in here. And it's true, and we've been looking at, do we rent, whatever. We were on the track of looking for land, had been offered a piece of land. And Ty Pravosky got involved with us, came, looked at the land, was all interested in it, was thinking about, all right, characteristic of how to build a building. And Ty Pravosky is a Bible follower and an architect that deals with large buildings and lots of renovation of large buildings. And so we had this going, and all of a sudden this building shows up. And we started looking at it, and it makes a lot of sense. We're going to talk about that as we go on here in a little bit. But that's how we've kind of progressed from this little free space to talking about land and building to now suddenly, wow, here's this huge opportunity sitting out here. And that's kind of the progression we've made over the last 6 or 7 months. We need sufficient room to be able to do the processing. It's got to be clean space. We work on top of freshly washed cloths. Elaine Cox is our primary person in the preservation area, and she takes the white gloves home and washes them every time. So nobody touches these documents without white gloves on. All right, and they wear scars. Some people wear scars on their heads because you don't want to get hair down on the document. So we're really strong about that. We would like to have a room that's a clean room, you know, where nothing else goes on in there but the documentation. So it's a minimization. Right now, the board has to come through the same area. We meet in another room, we go back out through that same area. It's not ideal. It's not creating a huge trauma, but it's not the ideal way to work. And so this is some of the way that that we are moving, trying to move into some new space. And we're also looking at the whole notion of how do we be sure these documents are preserved. So fireproofing is important. Now, the space we're in now, based on the way the old buildings were built, lots of concrete floors, etc., with wood on top of them. And so there's not nearly as much to burn in this building as would be a typical building, particularly a more modern building. But we recognize the need for fireproofing, so we have bought a fireproof file cabinet and a fireproof big cabinet that weighed, what was that, 900 pounds? 900-pound cabinet, offloaded out of the back of Peter Nordine's work truck. And with 8 of us lifting that thing off and scooting it across the floor. And we've got a room now, because we took over the 3rd carriage house, all right? So we took that over and we built in a fireproof wall and fireproofed all around the top of it, and concrete floor above it. And so now we literally have a fireproof space for materials that we have. But we will be needing a lot more than what that space can hold as we move forward. So that's some of the progression we've moved through, really beginning about a year ago.
I can Ben to say a little bit about the progression of our search. We were looking, as you said, there was a possibility of some land being donated and building a building. And Ty also worked very closely with Ted Judson in India on the Memorial Tower. He was one of the main people in charge of that under Ted's direction, I think. But he's also done a lot of large-scale commercial buildings. And so we're looking at what do we need to have an archive that works to best practices, that has environmental controls, fireproofing, but we also wanted it to be a place where it was accessible. People could come there. Somebody's phone's ringing. And looking at what we need in terms of space, and looked into the possibility of buying property and building this building. And it would take probably a year and a half minimum to find and build and have everything ready, and we were progressing along those lines. And then this property became available that we just went to take a look at. And it turns out that this has absolutely everything we're looking for and what an archive needs, not just for now or next year, but for a very long time in the future. And we'd be very happy to share a little bit more information and give you some idea visually as well about this. It's a school, it's called Red Oak School, and excuse me a second. It was built in 1928 by a quite famous local architect. So this is a picture of the school. We have a number of other pictures I'll show you in just a minute. It's called the Red Oak School. It was built in 1928. And back then, schools were considered very important public buildings. And as such, were given a lot of care, attention, and money to be built very well and to last. So what we have is basically a fireproof structure. 16-inch walls, concrete and steel reinforced flooring, on top of which is hardwood maple floor, which has all been refinished. You'll see in the pictures momentarily. Beautiful feeling, and set up in classrooms and some offices, as well as an auditorium. And it's quite an extraordinary location. And I was out of the country when the board found out about this, and I came back, and I didn't really know about this idea. Okay, let's take a look. And when I went there, particularly looking it over very carefully with Ty, the architect, I just have to tell you personally, I had one of those feelings of, well, I can see it. I can see it in 20 and maybe many, many more years from now as a very, very vibrant, dynamic BABA hub. The Asheville area is becoming such a hub. We moved there 9 years ago, and there was a wonderful BABA community. And since then, I don't know what's going on. BABA's got some magnet or something, because more and more people are finding they're attracted there. I don't know how many of you know Winnie Barrett. It's an old BABA lover, a dear friend who lives in Asheville. And she said recently, she said, you know, maybe it's for this archive that the reason that we're all moving here, which I thought was a wonderfully sweet bit of encouragement. This is a big building. It's huge. There's a lot of space in it. And we don't need this much space right now. I definitely see this archive project to include educational programs, research, display area, a number of other activities related to BABA and archiving. I can see it being used, all of it, eventually. That will take quite some time. The beauty of this is that there is space that's available to grow into. And secondarily, I think Hugh can probably speak to this a bit more in a minute, the model that we're looking at in this space is to rent out some of the classrooms, to generate income, to have cash flow coming in to support the activities of the archive. And this is, I think this is a very important thing. This will have a way of sustaining itself, as well as having community participation, so that there is space available into which we can incrementally expand in 6 months, in 5 years, or a much longer time frame. The size of the building that we would be able to build for the same amount of money would be about 4,000 square feet. And I would not have room for anything that would be income generating. So all of the expenses of it as a site, the archive and its expenses of hiring people and buying equipment, that would all have to be continually, funds would continually be raised for that. So I'm going to turn it over to you to talk about that model a little bit, and I'm going to cue up some other pictures that we have.
There's also an old school that sits on an island in the middle of the French Broad River in the little teeny burg of Marshall, North Carolina. No longer used by the county government. An individual bought the building and he rents the classrooms out at $600 a month to artists that are being forced out of Asheville because the River Arts District is becoming popularized, and that's just what happens every time an artist group gets started. So they rent those rooms at $600 a month. We have 11 potential rooms here to rent. We'll not rent all those, but let's just use some round numbers. Let's suppose we rent 8 of them at $600 a month. We're talking about $4,800. If you allow me, I'll round it off to $5,000 a month. That's $60,000 a year. We have a house out behind, and you'll see a photograph of that in a minute, that would rent somewhere in the neighborhood of $900 or $1,000 a month. So let's just assume another $10,000. So we're looking at $70,000 potential income. Now you're going to have to back some expenses out of that. There'll be some utilities got to come out of that. But suppose it's 25% we got to bring off of that. Well, we're still looking at $50,000, $55,000 as a fundamental base of operation. A new building won't allow us to do that. We'll be coming back to the community every year. Now, we don't want to sell the notion that, oh, we'll never come back to the community again, because that's just not realistic, particularly as we grow and expand and there's less rental space. But maybe that'll be beyond our lifetime. So that's an exciting piece for me, because as a business model, it now becomes very sustainable. And because we want to do this as an outright purchase with no debt, period, then it's a building that survives well by itself. So we've tried to build a model around which this building is self-sufficient and self-sustaining, and we don't have to worry about it moving forward. So that's one of the factors. Another factor is just comparing the cost. including the money to fix this building up. And we've been getting lots of quotes and things, and they vary. So once again, this is with Ty's expertise, Peter's expertise, us getting quotes, etc. But even after we've gotten a lot of money and fixed this building completely up, including the gymnasium now, and you'll see photographs of that, that's a place we could back off if we needed to. We're talking about in the neighborhood of $50 a square foot for this building. If we build a new building, not including the land, Ty says we're looking at least $250 a square foot. Now, that's his estimate, and we know we're at an estimate. So we're not like looking at 200 or 250. We're looking at 50 and 250. And so the contrast is enormous for the amount of space we get. And Scott's been alluding to it being a really active, involved center. We would love to see it become a whole community center. Maybe the music sahavas are there. Maybe Southeast Gathering someday shows up there. All sorts of possibilities, because that gymnasium space is huge, and you'll see that in a moment. So that's some of our way of looking at this building. And I will tell you, I was a skeptic to start with, because I have, in my family background and personal management history, I know about managing some old buildings. Okay? And so I was a skeptic, like, do we really want to do this? And the more I looked at it, the more I saw the feasibility, and the more I understood how, with a little bit of time, we can work our way into this thing. I'm a firm believer, and this is a grand opportunity for us to set up an archive for a long time, sustainable position, way into the future, way beyond all of our lives. So, Scott, let's look at some photographs.
Run through a few photographs for you. This is the, sorry.
How about the grounds? How much acreage do you have around?
Thank you for asking. There's 6 acres, almost entirely flat.
Yeah.
Part of what I said about how schools were,
Volleyball courts,
yeah, volleyball, definitely, basketball, there's all sorts of possibilities there. 6 flat acres. The slope is away from the building in all directions in terms of drainage. Environmentally, it's an extraordinarily well-sited place. It's in a cul-de-sac in terms of security, very easy to make it a secure environment. The outside land space has potential again as rental income in terms of outdoor events, potentially to generate some income, or outdoor events for BABA functions. There's a lot of flexibility there.
I'm excited for you for the sake of being a community center. Like, this has become a community center here.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it sounds exciting.
So let me just run through some of these photographs for you, just to do it quickly. This is a view from the athletic playing field towards the school. This little green thing here is like a concession stand, but there's bathroom facilities in there in terms of any outdoor events. Just looking at it from a few different angles, you can see the number of windows. They're very high windows with tremendous high ceilings and tremendous natural light. This was built at a time when these things were prized architecturally. You have ventilation, you have light. So for our purposes, and also potentially in terms of renting some of the space to artists. This is a small house cottage on the grounds that Hugh mentioned is a potential rental. It's been recently refurbished, and people who are living in it. It's a bit of a man cave. There's a guy and his 3 sons, and it's an experience. I've been inside, and it really looks like that's what it looks like. And so there's some stuff piled on the porch there, but the building is sound. It's recently been refurbished and is well suited to, could be a rental unit for a BABA couple or whoever might want to use that. Or the outside. This is one of the interior hallways along the classroom wing, and I think we give you the actual color of it. Ty Pravasti has created a very exhaustive analysis of the property, which is available on the website. We have a copy in a binder over there just for you to glance at. 49 pages long. Extremely professional, extremely detailed. There is, if you want to look at it online or in person, there is a summary. The last 3 pages are pretty good summary, and the rest of it goes into the meat. So this is, we've had some fantastic people take a look at this. Both Peter Nordine and Ty have looked at the building very critically and very carefully in terms of what it needs and what we can do with it and how it's suited to the both immediate and long-term needs. But as Ty said in his report, the current color scheme in the hallway is hard to endure. I think he's right. So this one, that one looks a little bit more attractive without the colors. But
Was this a public school?
this was a public school.
Okay, K through 12?
Yes,
through 12?
originally.
Yeah.
Okay.
It hasn't been used as a school in a long time. Recently, in the past, I think 6 or 7 years, it's been owned and operated by a religious organization that it's kind of like a version of Habitat for Humanity. They get volunteers together, mostly high school, college-age kids in the summertime, and they send them out to help fix up people's houses who can't afford to have their houses fixed or have been damaged by weather or things like that. So it's a service organization. And they were very pleased to hear about the kind of thing we wanted to do with the building. They really didn't want to sell it to someone who'd either tear it down and put up a bunch of, ticky-tacky houses and all that. This is an image of the auditorium. It's big.
Wow.
And you can see a basketball net in the background. It could be used as a gymnasium. I don't have a picture right in this series. There's also a stage. And there's room behind it underneath the stage. With some work, it could be turned into a very good professional performance area. And this is an option for the future. We certainly see it and hope that could be a very valuable use. But in terms of the archive in the near future, it's not a requirement. This could happen down the road. So there's a gymnasium wing, and then there's the big classroom wing with 2 different parts of it that can be separated. And it would be the classroom wing that we would be primarily interested in looking at. And this again is the picture of the front entrance. So
What does the sign say above the door?
Oh, thank you for asking. It's
In the eye of the storm.
in the eye of the storm. It's their motto of the current, because they do a lot of storm damage help. And the rooms currently have names. They have Ruth and Enoch and other biblical references there. But one thing that they said that I really appreciated, this is kind of an aside, but just had to do with our feeling in talking to people there. They said, well, we're the kind of Christians who we're not so interested in talking, we're much more interested in doing, helping people. I said, great, that's...
Where are they going?
I can answer that.
Please.
What they found is that, I don't know if you could see it, but there's stacks of extension ladders. And you go in the basement and there are tons of tools. I mean, like 50 shovels and 50 rakes. And what they found is that against the code, they were sleeping the helpers in these classrooms on mattresses, and then load them up in vans in the morning and drive them out to wherever. And they've gone so far out now that the next places they need to work are too far out to use the school. And so they're going much more to a local one-time kind of operation to take on the next communities. So they want to be out of the building, and they'll continue to work. They're also shifting the focus of their center from here to some town in Florida. So that's why they want to get out. And they were particularly interested in us. And I want to tell the story about Peter. Peter goes to take a look at the building. And Peter Nordine says to David, the guy he's the big coordinator of everything. He's not on the board, so he's not a decision maker, but he's kind of like their executive guy. And Peter's kind of where? So where are you from? The guy says, Oklahoma. I said, where in Oklahoma? Shawnee. Shawnee? What, do you know about Prague? Oh yeah, I lived in Prague. Gee, you did? Well, you know, we got this Bible center there in Prague. Yeah, you know, I'd heard about that. He said, so you knew Dr. Burleson? He said, yeah, they're right down the street from Dr. Burleson. And then Peter says, because, you know, they're overhauling the second property out there. And Peter says, well, do you know someone? And they just went through this litany of names about who all they all knew. And so it's like, holy mackerel, Prague, a town of 1,500 people? You know, 2/3 of the way across the country, and it shows up Dave sitting in here.
That's interesting.
So, you know, that sent a lot of goosebumps through a lot of people about, whoa, what is this connection here? And Dave's a great guy, very, very friendly, very cooperative, helpful guy.
So looking at this for all the reasons that we've shared with you in terms of the location and the area, just to backtrack just for a second, these folks who are working with, you know, disaster relief and all, they're going to Florida. That's where they're really needed. And one of the main considerations for a very long-term archive project is stability. You know, what's the ground like underneath? I lived in California for 15 years. And I know it's possible to build underground storage facilities there, as has been done. But generally speaking, you don't want to put a building like this in a fragile environment, whether it's from flooding. We had some really heavy rains recently. Not a drop of water anywhere. Everything drains, and that's a pretty good test, I'd say. That, you know, everything drains appropriately and away from the building. You get the tail ends of hurricanes like that. Maybe we don't get tornadoes. Don't generally get forest fires, but this building's not going anywhere in a fire. The area around it's clear, and it is fireproof as a structure. It's not burnable. So what we have here is we have an extraordinary opportunity to grab something, and the cost and the value is an extremely good value compared to going out and building our own building and ending up with something that was, you know, a fifth the size, that wouldn't have room to grow in, wouldn't have income potential. So for that reason, we're very excited, and it does feel like a leap. And the board decided this was worth pursuing, and talking to a number of people, and in the process of very actively reaching out to the BABA community for support at this point. So organization went in and put an offer on the property, and the offer was accepted, and now we're in a position of trying to raise the funds to be able to complete the purchase, and we're very, very hopeful that we can do that. In terms of the figures that are involved, the purchase price of the building at 25,000 square feet is $725,000. And with a lot of careful looking and examining and bid taking, we estimate currently that the full renovation costs are in the realm of $475,000. And that would bring the total to $1.2 million to have everything, including the auditorium, everything up to standards. That sounds like a big figure, but in terms of the value of the space, it really isn't. It is, what we would have would be such an extraordinary foundation on which to build something really, I think, quite spectacular for BABA, in the BABA world, for a long time to come.
And you have kitchen facilities in here too.
Thank you, I didn't mention that either. I don't have all the photos. There's a commercial kitchen.
Yeah.
The kitchen needs work,
Right.
but it has very, very functional and very expensive equipment in there in the terms of ovens and dishwashers and all that sort of thing. So in terms of catering for large events, it's there already.
So that's another income potential.
Yeah.
Asheville's a wedding destination city. I have a friend who rented the auditorium in the Marshall High School Well, the man who owns it, they grew up together, and he gave him a break at $3,000. What we've been told by people is any place you get in Asheville that's anywhere, got any kind of space for a large number of people, we're going to go $6,000 to $15,000. So if we raise sufficient money to be able to go all the way through the auditorium, we want to lower the ceiling, put in new HVACs, et cetera. That's included in the budget estimate. That gives us another potential. So just take the $6,000 figure and we can rent it 5 times a year.
Yeah.
That's $30,000 more dollars. If you take the earlier numbers, we've raised that to about $100,000. Now again, you got to back out some expenses.
Yeah.
But once again, look at the business opportunity as a sustaining operation. And really like that. So, kind of
How
question.
far from downtown is it?
It's about 14 minutes from downtown.
That's how Hugh drives.
Well,
Add another minute or two.
okay, and it depends on how many of the traffic lights you catch, but it's 4-lane highway.
Downtown Asheville.
26 coming up to Weaverville, and it's Highway 2570, 25 and 70 going toward Marshall. So it's 4-lane all the way.
Is it technically in Weaverville?
It's in Weaverville, yes.
It's in it's in the Weaverville postal area. It's not inside the town of Weaverville itself. It's right on the edge of Buncombe County and Madison County.
Right.
What's your relationship to other archives, like NASA ones and India and Meher Center's archive? And what's your relationship?
I'd say our relationship is evolving on all of those counts. And as I said in the sort of in my opening comments, our desire is to be cooperative and collaborative with all other archives. And we have explored collaborative work already with Narshwan in New Jersey, and certainly foresee more of that in the future.
Because I heard, one point I heard he was thinking of moving his archive to Asheville. Is there anything in that?
We've had there's been conversations about that. At the moment, I think the answer to that is not presently. If that were to happen, we would be more than welcoming and open to that. That would be, I think, a wonderful outcome, but that's really his decision. He's recently looking for a larger space. He has been, as I've understood from him directly, for some time at capacity and not able to take more things. And the things that he has, there's an awful lot of work in terms of processing it. And there hasn't been the manpower, woman power, locally to do all of that. So there's a lot waiting to be done that's important. But in terms of a place in the States where people with collections who want to make sure it's got a safe place to go, I don't think that he has the capacity to take that in at the moment. So certainly working together in a cooperative way. We don't see that we're taking. First of all, we don't see anything that we have is going to be ours. It's Baba's, and it's for the world to access in any way that we can facilitate. In terms of the archive in India, again, we've had quite a bit of interaction and correspondence with them on a number of issues, including talking about specifics on some of the technical things and working to learn certainly from their great experience and also to share some new things that are coming up in the States of how things are processed on a technological level.
I think there'd be a lot of learning involved, because I know my daughter-in-law works at the Indian Archive, and it's very technical, all the stuff they do there.
Yes. Yeah, it is very technical.
It is.
And she's had a lot of training and stuff. And you haven't started that process yet.
Well, one person that we hadn't mentioned, which is important to mention, is Elaine Cox, who's done quite a bit of archiving material, did a lot of work in India. She is one of the key people involved in the archive at this point, and she's trained, continues to work with a growing number of volunteers, certainly on the rehousing and processing of documents and photographs so that things are preserved properly. It's definitely yes, there's some learning to do, and there's a lot of enthusiasm to move forward with that. Does that answer your question?
First of all, I appreciate, and you are doing a great job, and what a great idea to have a permanent place for Meher Baba, our beloved Baba's, clothes and everything else that is been touched by him, or correspondence and all that. Looking at that, and I was also involved in Los Angeles. I was a board member at LA Center, and my understanding at that time was, like Phyllis Frederick, as well as Adele Larkin, they kept their Baba valuable in security deposit box, because it was, they didn't, first of all, at one time we were renting the place, on Santa Monica Boulevard, and then they moved to another one. So they have, still, it has kept kind of silent of where the location is. The reason for that is security. I mean, you don't want to make it publicized to the whole world that we have Meher Baba's archive in such a big, building, because my concern is of robbery, of, somebody can come and bomb it or something like that. There is a lot of anger and animosity in the world right now with other religions, with other castes. So, I feel that it's better to find a place, maybe 3,000-4,000 square foot, but do not even announce where it is. You have to keep it at this time private, because at this generation, I don't think we are, Baba is in progress of manifestation, we all know, but right now, the political and the religious system in America and in the world as such, that you don't want to make it too publicized.
One of the things to address your concern that we haven't talked about, for the very long-term vision of the archive, there needs to be not only the space above ground, but there needs to be a very secure, archivally created underground vault. And that's not in the current budget. That is the next phase, and it's going to take some time to properly research this and go through a process of evaluating how best to do that. I really hear your concern, and I certainly understand your own experience relative to these things. I personally think that this work will broaden people's awareness of Baba. I don't think we're not going to have, large collections of Baba, things that Baba has physically been in contact with, out for the public to be handling. The security is paramount, and the modification, improvements to the building and the budget, discussions with the architect, absolutely have focused on security. We talked about the fireproof nature of it. That's number one piece of security. But in terms of access, it would be very secure. The vaults will, in the building, storage of this material will not be accessible. They're not going to be people walking by who have any access to it.
But that's also one of the reasons why we really want to push the technology piece. So that let's assume we've got Nosh in India and Australia and us, all right? And we've been able to get stuff up on the technology, and now they have copies of everything, technologically speaking, that we have. And so uprising occurs in India, or uprising occurs in the US. Other places have got it. We'll be adding steel doors to anything that has any Baba material behind it. Paper, garments, whatever. We'll have security cameras. There's already security in the building. We'll have security cameras. The people we would rent to, and I've got a background in commercial and residential rental. We're going for artists. There'll be very strict clauses in the leases about what's allowed and not allowed. and we would do with an empty space before we allow the violation of some of those.
Yeah, Mary Nush and I are part of, we're on the May Her Living Board,
Yes.
which is a group where we're trying to start assisted living home for elderly Baba lovers. And Jack Small, this was Jack Small's inspiration, and he was really the one that started it. And in his will, I know he left some of his archives to the May Her Living thing. And now this is just rumors, of course, but we've heard that somebody's putting pressure on Gwendolyn to give the archives that Jack had intended for May Her Living to your archival thing. Now, you guys wouldn't do that, would you?
Putting pressure on anybody to do anything. Absolutely. No.
Good. Okay, just needed to check. You know how rumors are.
Indeed.
You know, if we start the pressure game, then we're in the competition. And we are real clear. We are about preserving, documenting, and making it available. We are not in the competition.
Yeah.
So whether we take those materials and we become the source by which we do all the work, or whether we help Nashwan do it or whatever, we are simply not interested in being a competitive group.
One of the things about all this is looking at the relative ages in the room and in the Baba community. And as I said earlier, it's not about us. It's about us that we can help facilitate something happening, but in terms of longer term, it's many generations to come. And I invited Laura to join us. My daughter Laura is here and going to be helping as a counselor at the Youth Sahavas just next week, I think. We had a conversation a month ago or so about stories and Baba and your generation, and I just wanted to ask if you wanted to share your perspective a little bit.
I realized that I know your grandmother met Baba. I know it was here, and that's it. That's all I know. And I know that we have pictures of you with Mara and with Mani. And it's okay that I don't know more about what happened before, but I can learn your stories of with the Mandali and of your time growing up, your first time in India. And what's gone already, that's okay. What's been lost in history, that's okay. But it's not too late to absorb and collect and preserve and share what is already still here. I feel so honored and lucky to have had conversations one-on-one or in group settings at the Sahavas here in Asheville with people who spent time with Baba. And I think the time will come where my generation is the closest link because I was linked to you all. And if I could financially, if it were feasible to just full-time work with Baba artifacts, I would do that. I would wear the little white gloves. There's a sacredness to what's on the physical plane that touched Baba and has been in this community. And it would hurt to see it locked away. It would hurt to see it inaccessible.
I remember you also shared something about and I think we referred to your friends, your generation's exposure to the stories. It's like, well, what's going to happen to the stories? And all of a sudden, this realization that the stories are not necessarily going to survive. How's that going to happen? I was really moved by your comments about that, your conversations with friends of yours.
I think now there's a playfulness to it of like, oh, I didn't remember that one quite right. Can you set me straight? Or we can just go and ask someone who's much older, and they'll have the answer because I might not remember it right, but the time will come where we won't have that older person to ask for, and we are the torchbearers. And that's really quite soon. Like, I'll have kids, then you'll hopefully meet them. Like that, it's stacking up quite quickly.
Thank you. I think it's important. One of the issues I've heard for quite some time in the Baba community is that, you know, it's kind of getting to be a bunch of old folks. And, you know, that's true. I certainly count myself in that group these days. And, you know, many people in the community have had children who've had children. There are more new generations, but in terms of the community and the input, I have heard for some time that the younger generation now having young children doesn't necessarily feel quite as included in how things are being talked about. And one of our desires is to keep in mind that this is for them and for their kids and grandkids, et cetera, and wanting to have input from all sides. Other questions? Yes?
One of the things that really excited me when I first heard about this project from Erich Adams at least 2 years ago, maybe 3, was that I have some things that the Mandali gave to me that are physical objects. I have a few letters from Mani, but mostly it's physical things. And the whole idea of not having them hidden away really is what fired me up. So I won't say what I have. I've told you that in a letter, but just that they be available to be held in a plexiglass box or whatever's decided, but not just knowing that something's stored away on some metal shelf in India. I just didn't like this at all. People in my age group were sending stuff back to India, and I felt I was never going to do that. To me, when I first came to Baba, which was when I was 28 years old, just turned 29, was holding Baba Sadra, being able to touch it in the New York group, holding things that belonged to the Mandali, having some bangles that I have that Mara gave to me, that the women wore, being able to actually physically hold them. So, and I still have some of those bangles, for example. That when you talk about younger people not feeling included, I would personally, with the things I own, will intend to give them to you all, but having had the understanding that they are not, they're going to be on view. So Marinush brought up a thought, which I'd never thought about the security from, active aggression towards Baba's things. All I've ever heard from over the years was, if you have these things, it's important to make sure, you've got them in your house. Our house, more could happen to something in our homes than anything else. Hurricanes here, flooding, fire, humidity, on and on. So, some things, as somebody said, and I forget who I heard this from a number of months ago, some things, the things I want, I would like people actually even to be able to touch. Yes, with white gloves, but to be able to hold them. And some of Baba's items will deteriorate because of that. But still, those people who live until those things are so gone that there still be fragments of them. Just to have that experience, which is totally invaluable. To have been able to hold up, and I knew enough not to put my head actually on Baba Sadra, but to hold it in my hand was an extraordinary experience and very different from now. Everything's plexiglass, and yes, I can, So I'm saying all this just because that had been my understanding when I first spoke with Erich Adams. And I'm hoping that, there's always a chance that something get blown up on whatever level, but that, the museum part of this building, which I find extraordinary, this big red oak schoolhouse, that you would have an area where people who love Baba or want to be in contact with things from Baba, even if they don't quite love Baba yet, would be possible. And I see that as part of what I think your intentions from the beginning were. So I wanted to add that aspect.
Thank you very much. I think that very much is a need and a desire that we would like to try to address along with responsible preservation. And it is a dance try to balance that all out, I believe. But it is our deep desire and our passion to preserve and promote dynamic links to Baba. Through the story, through hearing someone's story. I mean, as I mentioned in the story I read about my grandmother, in the course of reading over these letters in the Fredella collection, there was a lot of correspondence from Mara, some of which was written by her, some of which was, I think, dictated by her, but all her words. And it's not possible as a volunteer to read all this stuff. You have to be efficient as well, but occasionally one does read portions of it. And it was just so extraordinarily moving for me, and I know it's true for other people who volunteered there, to feel a connection of her love for her beloved in these letters, which weren't philosophical letters. They were about daily life and concerns and this and that, but there was a flavor. There was almost an aroma, if you will, that's the kind of thing we very much want to try to ensure that people have access to.
Any further questions?
Thank
you for coming.
I want to put up one last thing.
Okay.
If we could put that on. We mentioned the financial side of the project, and what we are charged to do, if this is in order to have this occur, to take advantage of this opportunity, is to put out the opportunity for people to participate. It's coming up. And there are a lot of ways to participate, and one of them certainly is financial. And this was included in one of the emails that went out. But this is one example of how we can reach this goal that we need. And one thing we're very moved by, very excited by, is that 2 people have already stepped forward and made pledges in the total of $150,000. So that's 1/8 of the total goal. And we want as many people to be able to be part of this and participate as possible. Potentially hundreds of people contributing as they can. And as you can see, any project of this kind is going to require a smaller number of people who are able and moved to do so, to step in with some very sizable contributions. And this was just one scenario. There are many different ways to come to this figure in total. But without doing anything publicly until very recently, we are already 1/8 of the way towards the full goal. The purchase of the property is a cash purchase, and the closing is in the middle of August, which is as far out as we could stretch it. And so we need to raise sufficient funds to purchase the property, as well as have enough to do what we want to do.
2 months to raise this amount?
Yes.
That's good. Debbie Nordine on your side.
Debbie Nordine, who is in the film, Debbie Nordine is very much on our side, and a wonderful Baba cheerleader.
Yes.
She and Peter are very, very enthusiastic about this. Peter's been talking about this kind of project for years, ever since I knew years before Asheville, but certainly in the last 10 years in Asheville, about a location, and they have their own personal collection of things, but he wants to do it for others as well. We didn't mention this, Hugh, but Peter Nordine is an extraordinary man, extraordinarily knowledgeable about Baba. He's an encyclopedia. I was at a Baba meeting at Winnie Barrett's many years ago, and Peter had done in his back, and he had to lie on the floor. And there were so many people crowded into Winnie's living room that he was in a hallway. You couldn't see him, but he was lying on the ground because he works in construction and he hurt himself. And somebody was I don't even know what it was, but someone was talking about their Baba experience, or there was a discussion, and someone said, well, in 1953, when Baba said, and from out the door, around the corner, in the hallway comes this booming voice, 1954! He has that kind of knowledge and awareness that it's beautiful, very touching. And he's also very gifted as a builder and a contractor.
Yeah.
He has offered to contribute his time to some of the work that needs to be done on this building. And I'm so touched by that. I mean, this is what he does for a living, and he's offering to contribute his efforts and to help get people who we would pay to do some of the, many of the other details. So that's the kind of support that we have at the moment, which we're very excited about. And I'm reminded of some of the early stories of the Blue Bus tours and the New Life, when Baba would send out one of the Mandali with preposterous instructions. Go find a place for 40 people to sleep and someone to feed them for 2 weeks, and they can't know who we are and they can't see me, and it has to all be for free. And it's like, what?
And it would happen.
And it would happen again and again. And when I moved from California to England, it was a powerful decision to move and to get married, and I just knew it was the right thing. And I wrapped up my life there in impossible amount of time. A busy practice, a clinic, employees, house, et cetera, et cetera. And I just said, Baba, okay, over to you. I'll do my best.
Inshallah.
And called up all these people that needed to do work. And said, sure, we can do that for you in 3 weeks. I said, well, actually, I need it like 2 days from now. And everybody laughed. And I said, you know what, do me a favor. Just humor me and just take down my number. If there's a cancellation. Oh, sure. Well, as Baba would have it, all these people called back and said, you're not going to believe this. I said, yeah, well. And it all got done. So I'm reminded of both of those things in what we have before us in trying to raise the funds to make this possible. It's an opportunity that we're very excited about. We hope that there are people who would like to, we're moved by the vision. That's really what it's about. Be moved by being part of something that will outlive all of us, and to support it moving forward. So we're a small group in the room today. I know others might see the proceedings up, as they're recorded, but it's a strong invitation to look within and see if it's something that you feel you resonate with and are interested in, drawn to support. And you had some things you wanted to say about that.
We recognize that it will be through generosity that this whole project comes about. And we feel like there's so much generous effort, all the volunteers, the time the board puts in. And we want to extend the invitation to whether you can afford $25 or whether you can afford $25,000, whatever. Come be a part of this. We would like for this to be a community effort, not just Asheville. A lot of people say, oh, it's Asheville. No, we want this as a community effort. So whether $25 or some other larger number, you feel like you got your finger in the pie. It's a piece of yours. And then it really takes on a whole new life of its own. Right now we're struggling kind of in the formative stage of this thing. You know, we're working, we're getting organized, and we're moving through the cycles of learning how to function. But if it becomes a community effort, it will take on a life of its own. The momentum will be there to sustain it, both work-wise and financial-wise, way, 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 way into the future.
And really, you only need $175. I mean, 1,000. You don't need $1,200,000. You only need $750,000 to buy the building, and then you can worry about the other bit to remodel it.
And that's true, and we've looked at that because there are all sorts of zoning things or building inspection regulations, depending on what we can do and can't do, and how many people, and sprinklers or not sprinklers, and the list goes on. We could buy the building and move into the existing offices and function quite well for the foreseeable future, short of some huge collections coming our way. We could do that. We do need to put a roof on it. There are a couple of leaks in it right now, but the roof is aged. Because of my experience in managing commercial properties, you don't fool around with the roof.
Yep.
And so we got an estimate of $80,000 on the roof, so we got to have 800 as a minimum. Otherwise, it's an albatross. And we could hobble along after that. But I'd like to get to the place where at least we're generating some money so that we can turn that money back into the continued
Because once
upfit.
you get the place, it will generate its own money for the repairs.
Yeah.
Are you going to have a caretaker, like 24/7?
Quite possibly, there is that house, but also within the building itself, there is an apartment that's been set up that has been used by a caretaker. And that's very much a possibility. If there was the right person who would want, ideally, a Baba lover who would be able to live there and have the caretaker role. So we definitely look at that as a desired thing.
And one more thing too, I was the trustwalla for 7 years in New York City for the Baba Group. And at that time, people were sending whatever amounts they were from our Baba Group, and some people sent it directly, but we had a trustwalla. So I collected over that 7-year period. And just, $10 here, $20 there, $100 here, and I would gather it together, and twice a year I would send it. And I remember one time when the first time that Monty put out an SOS that a lot of people were waiting for the Perpetual Public Charitable Trust time period to send, and not to the Mondali firstly. I forget the exact terminology at this point, because it was a number of years ago. And she said, could people please send for the Mondali? It wasn't the Mondali firstly, but it was the part of the monies. It was a 3-month period that was sent to the Mondali. And I made an announcement at Baba House in New York, and a lot of people really contributed at that time because they didn't know what was happening financially with the Mondali, that they did need more money. And Monty had said, I feel really awkward. That wasn't the word she used, but asking for this. And then she said, no matter how much, even $1 really helps. She said at this time period in history, your dollar is really significant. In the future, people with lots of money will be contributing hundreds of thousands of dollars. But at this time period, to contribute is really significant. And that wasn't, again, the word she used. I don't have her exact words, but it really struck me that at the beginning of something, even $1 is that we're contributing at the ground level for something for Baba. And because Baba had left the Mondali's financial care to us and trust for us, this was where that statement was coming from Monty. So I just felt right now to say that.
Thank you.
What are you looking for? Are you looking for actual money now, or are you just looking for commitments of money since you don't know?
Both. We would anticipate that the large dollar folk would say, okay, when do you need this? And we would set up for bank transfers or whatever. And individual contributors may say, well, I can only afford $25, but I'll send you a check. So it's both. We don't expect the large dollar folk, well, the 2 pledges here, they've not turned the money over yet. They're simply pledges. And we would anticipate others doing the same thing. And if we were ready to call it in, we call it in.
Yeah, what we need is clear commitments or actual funds to proceed with the purchase. With the purchase and enough to make it viable as opposed to only having enough to close on the property that way.
And I'm assuming if you aren't able to close on the property, then whatever money you collect will go towards the next thing you find.
That's an interesting point, and a number of people have asked about that. That would be our first intention, that it would go towards another version, another opportunity to actualize the same vision. And at the same time, we make it clear for people that if they desire for the money to be returned, that would be an option. But our intention would be to use it for this purpose. We're open to individual conversations with people about that, absolutely.